To be honest, I love watching movies. I love watching good movies that when you start watching it, it grabs you and pulls you in. And if it's a good movie, what happens is that I start to identify with the character. With the character, maybe the main character, and I try to imagine looking at that character and the situation in which that character is moving through this movie. What would I have done if I were to be that person, that character? And one of those movies where I felt it very strongly was a movie that I watched several years ago by the title The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. It is that powerful story written by C.S. Lewis. And then it was turned into a movie several years ago. And in that movie we see this character of Lucy. Lucy, who is one of the children of this family, where the children have been moved outside of London because of the fear of bombardments by the Germans. And so they're, as children, they're together in this house. And in this house, which is large, the children are moving around, are playing hide and seek. And as they're playing hide and seek, Lucy crawls into that wardrobe. And as she gets into this wardrobe, and then she moves in between all these coats, these fur coats, all of a sudden she rolls into this other world called Narnia. Now maybe I'm not alone in feeling that today, on this Sabbath and these days, these last couple of weeks, you and I, we have like a mystery been pushed through this kind of wardrobe into this kind of new world. Everything looks different. And you and I, we're trying to make sense of the craziness. The craziness that is now our new reality. And we gaze around this strange, almost unwelcoming landscape. For sure, it's not C.S. Lewis Narnia. I mean, this strange, could I say desert? A desert of roads that are empty, hardly any car around, of shelves in the shops that seem to have been robbed from everything that should be on there. The isolation in which you and I have to live. Pastor J. John, in one of his devotions, he gave this land a new name. Not Narnia, but Covidia. Of course, from the virus that goes around at the moment, COVID-19. Covidia, it's a strange land. It's not our world as we know it. It's daunting. It has this effect on you and me. And yet, following the news each day, it seems that the door to the old familiar world is closed. It's closed. We are now in this new world. And we've been told we probably will be in it for quite some time. Using the old words of the King James translation, in Exodus 2:22, you will find it being said that we are strangers in a strange land. And what we face is threatening. Can even make us feel scared, anxious. I mean, words like stress, anxiety, mental pressure are now words that we constantly come around to in messages that you and I receive, in emails that we read, maybe social media, on television. There is pressure on all of us to try to deal with this new world. But as I shared also last week in the message for the parallel worship, we can find comfort in knowing that followers of Jesus, they have been here before. This is not something that we are experiencing as humanity for the first time. Sure that COVID-19, this virus, this pandemic, that is for all of us living on this earth now is unusual. It's new. None of us living on the planet right now have ever experienced anything like this before. But it's good to remember that almost every generation through history had to find a way through the Black Death, through plagues, cholera, all kind of terrible diseases. So others have gone before us through times like these. And last week I mentioned one such Christian, the great reformer, Martin Luther. I mean, the year is 1527 AD, a time when the bubonic plague is causing havoc all around Europe. Millions of people are dying. And Luther is asked the question whether it is okay to run away from this. Well, you see, Luther was never a man to give a short answer when a long one would do. He could not be short, and that way I can relate to him. So when this question was asked to him, like, should we as church leaders, as Christians, should we flee from all of this, run away, hide? He wrote even a whole complete booklet as a response. Originally, he gave it a title that can be quite depressive. The title originally was given to this booklet, Whether to Flee from Death. Whether to flee from death. But then he thought, I need to think of a more positive title to this booklet. And he changed it to Whether One May Flee from a Deadly Plague. I'm not sure if that really would make us feel a lot happier. But in it, when you look at the booklet, in it, Luther described his own position to think about it, what to do as a Christian, as follows. This is what he writes. I shall ask God mercifully to protect us. Then I shall fumigate, help purify the air, administer medicine and take it. I shall avoid places and persons where my presence is not needed in order not to become contaminated, and thus perchance inflict and pollute others, and so cause their death as a result of my negligence. If God should wish to take me, he will surely find me, and I have done what he has expected of me, and so I am not responsible for either my own death or the death of others. If my neighbor needs me, however, I shall not avoid place or person, but will go freely as stated above. See, this is such a God-fearing faith, because it is neither brash nor foolhardy and does not tempt God. As I said, Luther would not put something short if he could use a lot more words. He would be almost like a Paul in our days, the Apostle Paul. I mean, there's a lot to be found, of a lot of wisdom in only that passage, that paragraph. And at least, as I'm reading through it, I can find 4 lessons that we can take from this, that I want to share with you briefly this morning. Lesson 1, learn wisely. Learn wisely. You see, Luther, when he looks at the situation in which he was living, he adopts a strategy. He starts to use a method, which is becoming very, very common to us all today. You see, he's using self-isolation as much as is possible, avoiding to go where he is not needed. Because he knows, and he knew at that time, that he could infect other people. And therefore, he would just stay away from people as much as he could. And I'm sure you will have seen some of these videos, some of these clips. These TV evangelists claiming that this whole COVID-19, the coronavirus, is just a hoax. Or otherwise they would say, like, no, this is God testing us to see if our faith is strong enough. In other words, God brings it upon us and he wants to see, are you for real in your relationship with me? And what they then do, they invite their whole congregation and people from the community to come together in this mass meeting of worship, where you then see in these video clips how they hug one another, they kiss each other, they embrace, and they're all close together, claiming that God will protect them. I mean, even during this last 2 weeks, as a pastor, I received emails and texts from fellow believers prompting me to open our churches, to open the doors and fill our houses with people to worship. Because now, more than ever, we need to be in God's presence, as if God were only to be in those churches. See, Luther wrote that he would not claim this so-called divine protection, and then recklessly just go out there and expose himself to others. In effect, demanding from God to protect them. And now we're nearly 500 years later. That advice from Martin Luther seemed to be good advice. Our medical experts are clear. COVID-19 has claimed enough victims as it is. Try not to give it any more, they're saying. But there's another lesson. Lesson 2 says, live faithfully. You see, in that passage, Luther speaks about it, that he is praying to God for protection. And you and I, we can identify with that, can we? But then Luther goes even further. He starts to talk about his own death. And when you start listening to his words, it almost becomes uncomfortable. Because he just seems to be okay with dying, in a sense. But you see, when you read it again, when you contemplate these words, what we see is a believer who has this deep, calm trust in his Creator, in his Maker. Luther believes that God is in control. So 500 years later, how about you and me? What do we think? Is God still in control? If his Father in heaven takes him in death, Luther says, all he wants is to be assured that he has done his duty, that he has done what he's supposed to do as a Christian, and that he did not put anybody else at risk. Isn't it true that often our faith only asks, Lord, keep me safe today? Lord, keep me safe today. But Luther goes deeper. He says, no, not just about me, but also about my community. He puts his life totally in the hands of his Maker. And that leads me to lesson number 3, love richly. Love richly. In his booklet, Luther asks the question if church leaders should run away from danger. And his answer in short would be this. If you have no duties, you can leave. But if your neighbor, and here following Jesus, he meant anybody that he would be in contact with. If your neighbor needs you, you should stay. So he is thinking about others and not just about himself. Because that's one of the problems that we see with epidemics, don't we? We see the temptation that people start to have, like to just look after number 1, me, myself, and I. And this self-isolation almost encourages that, to only think about ourselves. That's why I loved last week how on Thursday evening, as I opened the door, I heard the noise in our street. People were banging on pots and pans, and people were clapping, and we joined in clapping for the NHS and for all those people who put themselves at risk for others to help. And if you are watching and you are in the medical profession, or if you are helping in shops or in cleaning, in all of these aspects that still need to be done, thank you so much. Thank you so much. You're not just looking for number 1, just yourself, but you're also thinking of everyone else. I mean, we see this panic buying, where people just buy as much as they can have, and then we see a number of days later how so much of it has been thrown away because we cannot eat it all. We are only thinking of ourselves. We're turning our houses into bunkers. For sure, self-isolation makes medical sense, but Luther teaches us as Christians the responsibility. Even within isolation, we can look after one another. You see, Jesus himself asked in Matthew chapter 16, verse 26, where he says, "What do you benefit if you gain the whole world but lose your own soul?" What will it give you if you're only thinking of yourself? Yes, we need to keep distance, and yet we are to love the people around us with all that we have. We are to love God and our neighbor as ourselves. Over the last couple of days, I have been blessed by the ministry of the One Vision Project, where together with the Mayor of Watford, Peter Taylor, and together with the MP, Dean Russell, we had opportunities to go and visit elderly people in our community. And of course, we kept a safe distance. We would just speak to them from several meters away as the door is open, or we would speak through an open window. Also going through some pharmacies that were still open and were doing extra hours to help people in need. We went to shops that are supporting their community. And all I saw was loving richly in action. And finally, lesson 4. Lean closely. Lean closely. Come closer. A dear friend of mine, who is a pastor in California, described what one of his sons had done as a response to the lockdown that they were experiencing there. You see, the boy had started to sleep outside in a tent. And so when the father that morning looked out of his window and saw the tent there in the garden and saw his son coming in the house, he asked his son, "Son, explain, what are you doing?" And the son said that he wanted to break this monotony. He wanted to break this kind of constantly doing the same old same. And being there in the tent outside, it made him feel more connected to the neighborhood. I like that thought. I like that because it is what the Apostle John describes when he talks about the coming of Jesus Christ being the light of the world. God choosing to live among us, to in a way put up his tent with ours. God moved into our neighborhood and he became flesh. And as he became flesh, God with us, Immanuel, he became exposed to our diseases, to bacteria, viruses, everything that makes us as human beings fragile. And then in that all, as he lives among us, we see this enormous wonder. God with us. Yes, there would now be stories of healing. There would be the beautiful parables, the kingdom to come. But Jesus came he wanted us to know above everything else this: you are not alone. I am Immanuel, God with you. I mean, that's what we read in that beautiful passage in Matthew chapter 1, where Joseph hears these words from the angel. All this took place to fulfill what the Lord has spoken by the prophet. Behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and they shall call his name Immanuel. Which it says and means God with us. God wants us to know, you and me, we are not alone. So we can learn wisely. We can live faithfully, love richly, and lean closely. And we see that in the life of our Lord Jesus Christ. And especially as we now are moving into this special time of the year, Easter, where we would have wanted to be all together and to celebrate the life, the death, and the resurrection of Jesus Christ. we are to learn from his life that in all the ups and downs, Jesus would never forsake us. He would never leave us alone. He would continually lean closer to you and me. And so as we started, let's go back to that landscape as we started our story of this morning. The landscape of Covidia. It's a landscape that we have to travel each day, and it's unknown, it's uncharted. Much of it we do not know yet, and we're still learning with one another. And so maybe the words of this well-known Welsh hymn may encourage you and me through these days. The words in that song and that hymn go like these. Guide me, O thou great Redeemer, pilgrim through this barren land. I am weak, but thou art mighty. Hold me with thy powerful hand. Matthew 1:23 says this, Jesus is Immanuel, the one who is God with us. In these uncertain days and leading into the Easter period, may those words give you comfort. May those words give you hope. And may those words give you courage. Amen.